This is CBS News, New York.
We're back with Exclamation Point, a conversation you'll see only here on our streaming channel, CBS News New York. Today, what I'd like to talk about is the possibility of political forgiveness as former Governor Andrew Cuomo tries to make a political comeback. Let's hear what he had to say about it.
And I want to move forward and focus on what is really important. I have fought the good fight in government and politics all my life, and I am not done fighting yet.
Now, Governor Paterson, you became governor after Eliot Spitzer had a little bit of a sex scandal and had to resign. I wonder, what your take on it is in terms of Governor Cuomo and whether he can legitimately make a political comeback after only a year out of office.
I think that remember that Governor Spitzer waited 5 years. He admitted to what he did. He resigned. He waited 5 years. He comes back in 2013 and runs for controller. And had he come back sooner, he probably would have won. He was defeated by Scott Stringer. Now, But it
was 5 years.
Yes.
Is 1 year too quick for
1 year
Cuomo?
is too quick. President George W. Bush didn't say a word after he left office in 2008. He comes back in the latter part of 2010. He does an interview with Oprah Winfrey. He says that he really felt guilty and sorry about Hurricane Katrina. He didn't think the government acted fast enough, and everybody loves him now. So what I'm trying to say is that contrition ignites compassion, that sacrifice breeds forgiveness. Governor Cuomo hasn't sacrificed one thing. He hasn't said that he did one thing wrong. One day in March of last year, he said that sometimes when I speak, I've been told that I offend people. Congratulations. We all do that. But what did he say that he did that was wrong? Nothing. And as long as he can't bring himself to accept the fact that some of these problems were caused by him, I'm not saying all of them, but some of them certainly were, I don't think he's going anywhere.
Mr. Blakeman.
Well, it's always possible to make a comeback. I think that the American people are very forgiving. I agree with Governor Paterson that I think you have to apologize and that you have to be contrite in order to garner that kind of sympathy. But I think Governor Cuomo's biggest problem is in the Democratic Party. They were the most vocal critics. I mean, his own lieutenant governor, who he appointed, who, in what is probably the most self-serving thing anybody could do, called for his resignation, which would make her governor. I think the fact that she turned on him, I think, is a big problem for his comeback.
Well, see, there's another question. He says he wants to start a PAC, a political action committee, where he's going to donate to various candidates. My question is, do you think anybody wants to accept money from him at this point, or would it be political dynamite? Governor Paterson.
I don't know. When people raise money, they raise money from different sources, and it always seems that they're going to get in trouble for it. But I think the public understands that the money's being used for the campaign for their point of view, not who necessarily contributes to them. I think that there certainly is a way back for him. I didn't mean to say that he couldn't make a comeback, but I mean, just last week, he lashed out at all the people that didn't help him when he was in trouble. President Biden, President Obama. I mean, Speaker Pelosi. He had everybody in there on his, not so fun list. And I don't see how you come back when you're still attacking and you still seem outraged at the fact that you got into any trouble at all.
But the biggest supporters of Governor Cuomo, when he got into his difficulties, was the African-American community. And I think the African-American community is a very loyal community to their politicians. And I think basically a lot of them were very offended and taken back that Governor Hochul so early on called for his resignation, which again was self-serving, would make her governor. And I think that that's going to be a problem for her at the polls, that a lot of the Cuomo supporters in the African-American community are going to remember that. And I think that they're not going to come out to vote. They may not vote for Zeldin, but I don't think they're going to vote for Governor Hochul.
So here's
well, he lashed out at the African-American attorney general who investigated him. He created a phony investigation of the African-American governor who preceded him that went nowhere. So he may think that he has a lot of friends in the African American community, but sometimes it's just a matter of getting to know someone.
So let's take a look at what he wants to do. In addition to his political action committee, he wants to do a podcast, and he wants to start a group that's going to go after guns or get illegal guns off the street. How long does he have to do this before he can then run for office again? Can he ever run for office again, or is he should just forget about public service altogether and just do the things he's doing now? Mr. Blakeman.
Well, I think there's a variable here. There are all the allegations from all the women that said that he did things that were inappropriate and that made them feel uncomfortable. And then you have the ongoing investigation of the whole nursing home situation, where a lot of the families of those who died in the nursing homes, they're still very, very angry with Governor Cuomo. And I think that they would form a very strong constituency against him. My advice to Governor Cuomo would be, you had a very brilliant career. You became governor like Governor Paterson did, which is, it's an incredible achievement. There are other things you can do, charity, other things, to rehabilitate your reputation.
But if his desire is to come back and be a candidate, and I think the clip showed that is his desire, what I'm saying is you're not doing it the right way. Anybody can be forgiven. I think had he stood up in front of the camera and said, when I asked my assistant about the sexual abuse that she'd suffered, there was no place for that conversation in the workplace. It was toxic. She worked for me. So her answer might not even be one that would be an honest answer, because she's being asked these questions. Had he got up and just laid out everything he did, I think a lot of what he was accused of would have gone away. The issue with the nursing homes was whether or not they gave the right statistics to agencies. That's a problem, but I don't think a governor gets impeached for it.
So I want to switch topics now, and I want to talk to you about the problem of emotionally disturbed people on the streets of New York. The latest example we have is of a person who stabbed to death an emergency service worker, a first responder. And according to police reports, he had a history of schizophrenia. His one contact with the police department, they brought him into a hospital for a short stay, and that was it. So, you're both very experienced lawmakers. You've had a lot of experience on the state and local levels. What can the state, the city, and local government actually do to get help for the mentally ill, to keep our streets safe and our neighborhoods safe?
I think in the cases of people who are arrested, as this individual was, there has to be an increase in what's called the 730 exam, where you examine whether or not the defendant is fit to even go to trial. And I think in addition to that, we have got to find better ways to house people who have mental illness. Mental illness in 90% of the cases is nonviolent, but in those 10% of the cases where it is, we've got people walking the streets, as County Executive pointed out just on last Thursday. This man who attacked this poor EMS worker was 61 years old, beloved by all of her colleagues, and she is the symbol of the latest travesty.
Well, I think they should be institutionalized. If you are someone who is mentally ill and you are violent, and again, I agree with Governor Paterson, it's the smaller percentage. There are people who have emotional issues that shouldn't be institutionalized. But for those who have a propensity for violence, they should be institutionalized because they're a danger to the community. And certainly, we can put together a strategy whereby we can have those people evaluated by doctors and bring it before a judge and let a judge make a determination. But it can't be we just put them in for 20 or 30 days. It's got to be they need treatment, and they need ongoing treatment, and they need to be out of the communities. We have far too much violence from people who have emotional issues because there was this big movement years ago to let everybody out. Well, they let everybody out. They're not putting anybody away anymore, and that's why crime has gone up so much with emotionally disturbed people committing them.
You know, Bruce, in the 60s and the 70s, there were these movies like The Shrike and one who flew over the cuckoo's nest. And yes, there were abuses in the psychiatric facilities at that time, but the executive is so right. The deinstitutionalization that started in the early 80s really wound up flooding the streets with people who had nowhere to go, they couldn't manage their own affairs, and they wound up becoming violent.
So is it right to blame deinstitutionalization, which started, as you point out, in the 80s, and is it to blame for what we're seeing now? But then the second question would be, what can the state legislature do now to rectify it? Can they go back? What laws should they pass so that we can do something about it?
All of these mass homicides and active shooter situations in the schools and otherwise, most of those circumstances result with people who were identified as having severe emotional issues, and they fell through the cracks in each and every circumstance. We've got to get serious about protecting our communities, and part of it is identifying people who are emotionally disturbed, who have a propensity for violence.
Governor Paterson.
He speaks for me.
I just wondered if you thought that we have to do something about the policy of deinstitutionalization and if we should change it.
I think that you could reestablish the institutions themselves, but to have them run with a lot more sensitivity and understanding of what mental illness really is.
So here's the question. Should the state reopen or open new psychiatric beds? And if so, where should they be and who should pay for it?
It wouldn't matter to me where they actually are because you presume that the patients are going to be staying there. But I think that it's just something that we're going to have to go into our budget process and create the resources for because it's very needed. And these random crimes that we read about, the one down right in the beginning of this year in Chinatown, where the Asian woman was murdered in her apartment, and maybe 6 or 7 others we could name if we just went through the newspapers over the last few months. It has to be addressed. It is going to cost something, and we need to pay for it.
Mr. Blakeman.
In Nassau County, our public medical center, NUMIC, is the only hospital on Long Island that has a psychiatric ward. There's not enough beds. We need more beds. Insurance companies have to be responsible when families have the insurance. If they don't have insurance, if they're underinsured or they don't have insurance, then it's up to us as a community to step up to the plate to make sure that people who have a propensity for violence are institutionalized. And yes, we have to pay for that, and it's a small price to pay to keep people safe.
So are you saying that it's not only the role of the state to pay for this, but also insurance companies should also have a role in paying for new psychiatric beds and the treatment of people in these hospitals?
Yes, because if you have medical insurance, that should be a covered event, that if someone in your family is emotionally disturbed and has a propensity for violence, that should be one of the illnesses that's covered under the insurance policy. I would like to see that. And then if they're not insured, then of course that would be a responsibility of government because it's government's first responsibility to keep the community safe.
So should this be a priority for the legislature when it comes back in January, Governor?
Yeah, I think it should. You know, years ago, when we were housing psychiatric patients that weren't eligible to go to trial because they didn't understand the charges against them, they couldn't help their lawyer, they were going to these institutions, and sometimes their classification was changed from criminal to civil, and they got out and committed more crimes. So we have never handled this issue of mental health well, but I think conversations between the two parties, like the one we're having right here, could really be the catalyst for change. And we really need it because I don't know that I walk 10 blocks now without encountering someone who even I can see has some type of mental disability.
So should we empower our police to take more direct action when they encounter somebody known as an EDP, an emotionally disturbed person?
I think they're ready to do that, but they don't know where to take them. We don't have places to take them.
They certainly would like to do that, but again, I agree with Governor Paterson. There is no protocol right now for the tremendous problem, especially here in New York City, with the fact that you have people that are emotionally disturbed that are violent.
So you're saying to the governor, whoever that may be, and members of the legislature that this should be on the front burner, not the back burner, and they should do it sooner rather than later.
One word, absolutely.
Governor Paterson.
In my time in the legislature, everybody was aware of it, but no one really seemed to want to take the steps. Former senator from Queens, Frank Padovan, tried to do it.
I remember.
And there were times when, you know, others of us supported him. But it's not one of those glamour issues, and inevitably something else for the moment seems more important. But I think all you have to do now is walk the streets, and you see it. And it frightens people. And I think the only thing greater than the increase in crime rate is the exponential factor of fear that people have about crime in this state.
I couldn't agree more. I think people feel frightened in their own communities. They feel frightened in their homes. And the governor and the legislature have not acted, and we need them to act. If not, there should be a change.
I want to close this section with one quick political question for each one of you. Mr. Blakeman, should Donald Trump be the presidential candidate of the party in 2024?
We're a long way to the election. We have a primary process. We'll see what happens. We've got some great candidates on the Republican side, and former President Trump has not indicated whether he's going to run yet, so I think it's premature to speculate on that.
Governor Paterson, should President Biden be the candidate of the Democratic Party in 2024?
Well, President Biden is thinking it over. He says there's a poll out that more Democrats would prefer that he not run in 2024. It's a decision inevitably that he has to make. I think if either of the two candidates in 2020 decides to run again, they'll get their party's nomination.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you both for joining me, and we'll be right back.